we did if-else statements and else-ifs and nested if-else statements and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to start out today talking about one other statement that you can use for decision making in C++, and that's the switch statement. And so we're going to start out by using that, and then we're going to move on to doing some more stuff with strings. So far, you know how to read a string in using cin, and you know how to read a string in using getLine, but we're going to talk about doing a little bit more string manipulation. So this is the material from the second part of, I believe it's chapter 3. Yes, it is. Yes, the second part of chapter 3. So anyway, so let's start out by assuming that we want to write a program which, let's see, let me put it in my comment here. Assuming we want to write a program, and I'm going to keep the program idea very simple because what we're focusing on is the language syntax that I'm introducing. So let's see, this program is going to input the user's first and last name, and then output one of three things. Output either the first name only, the last name only, or the name in last, comma, first format. Okay, so it's going to take some input, and then it's going to do one of three things. Okay, and again, the things that we're doing deal with reading in names. A name, of course, is a string, so we're going to have to output a name, and you probably remember this from a couple weeks back, that when you're outputting names, you know, when you have a string variable and you're trying to print out that variable, it's important that you have the string library included, okay, because the output operator or the insertion operator, you know, those two arrow thingies, those only work with strings if the string library is included. Okay, if depending on what compiler you're using, you might not have to include string because the compiler might do it for you, but you always should, because a program should always, when you write a program, it should always work with any compiler, and some compilers don't automatically include the string library, and we are using facilities from the string library, so you should have that. Okay, so we're doing one of three things. Let's see. The first thing we're doing is inputting the user's first and last name. So we're going to need variables to put these things in, the first and last name. So I'm going to declare two variables of type string, and of course you know from what we've done so far that both of these variables can then store strings, which are collections of characters, right? Not int values or double values, but strings. Okay, and then now we can use these variables to prompt the user for both their first and last name. I'm going to start out by asking them to enter these separately. We'll move on from this later on in the lesson, but right now we're just going to have them please enter your first name, and then use the first name probably doesn't have a space in it, so I'm just going to use cin to read in the first name that they enter, and then please enter your last name. Okay, and this is just using cin to read in a string like we did a few weeks ago. Okay, so the first thing we're doing here is getting the user's name. Okay, I don't always put comments in when I'm doing a little demo just because of time constraints, but I don't want you to think that you shouldn't be putting comments in, so I guess I should kind of give an example of what I mean when I ask you to comment your code. Okay, so I'm just going to put a comment in to indicate every task, everything that's kind of going on. I'm not going to comment every line or anything, but every major thing that's going on, I'm going to put a comment. Okay, so at this point in the program, we have the first name and we have the last name, right? So now what we need to do, let's see, is what the other thing that the program was going to do, which is, well, we need to, we're going to either output the first name only, the last name only, or last comma first. Okay, so probably what we're going to output, that's probably a choice we want to leave to the user. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is provide the user with a menu of choices. So in other words, I'm going to say to the user, do you want to output, and I'm going to try to do this in a way that's legible. I probably could do it all in one statement, but or in one line, but I'm trying to do it in a way that I can follow. I can get an idea of what it's going to look like. Okay, and I did use the, I did up in this first line use that backslash n. Putting a backslash n in your string is the same as putting the ENDL at the end. I just don't do that a lot, so I thought I would do it just so you have seen that. Some people like to do that instead of using the ENDL. I prefer the ENDL myself just because it is easier for me. So I'm asking them, do you want to do one of three things? And they have to somehow tell me, so I'm going to actually in my prompt say 1, 2, or 3. In other words, I want them to enter 1, 2, or 3. I want them to enter a 1 if they want the first option, a 2 if they want the second one, and the 3 if they want a 3 if they want the third option. Okay, so that's the menu that that I'm providing to the user, the menu of choices. Now, it's common in a program to offer the user a number of choices and of what to do. And when you do this, and again, I'm calling it a menu because it's all their options. When you do this, there actually are a set, discrete, in other words, exact number of choices that you want. Here, I want the user to enter 1, 2, or 3, and that's it, right? If they don't enter a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I'm kind of out of luck. I don't know what they mean. So, so when you, and if they enter a 1, I want to do one thing. If they enter a 2, I want to do something else. If they enter a 3, I want to do yet one other thing. So I could go on to use if else's, right? I could go on to check, well, to read what they want to do, and then use if else's. If they entered a 1, do something. If they entered a 2, do something else. If they entered a 3, do something else. But since we are in a situation where there are a set number of choices that are dependent on what the user enters, there's another statement that's kind of designed for handling this, and that's called a switch. So that's what we're going to use in this program. We're going to use a switch. So I'm not going to use if else's, although you could, but this will be, I think, a little bit easier to read. So so we ask the user for something. I need to get their choice. I probably should provide a variable for that. So I wanted them to enter 1, 2, or 3. So I'm gonna declare a variable for reading that in. I'm even going to initialize it to 0, just so it has something in it before I try to do something with it. In other words, I added another declaration up here at the front for the user's menu choice. Okay, and then I'm going to use that variable to read in what the user user picked. Okay, so, and hopefully the user picked a 1, 2, or 3. I did start these choice off with a 0 for a reason. In C++, if you don't put something in a variable, it doesn't automatically have a value in it. It just has whatever value happens to be in it from in that memory location from the last time that memory location was used by the computer. So I actually want to make sure that if a 1, 2, or 3 wasn't entered, and maybe the user entered something like an A, if the user entered an A, this would not read anything, it would not put anything in choice, but there would still be something in it that 0 would be in it, as opposed, so it's just, so I'm doing this just kind of to have a little handle on things that might happen. So I've just read what the user wants to do. Okay, so now we need to look and see what's in choice, and if what is in choice is a 1, we're going to do one thing. If it's a 2, we're going to do something else. If it's a 3, we're going to do something else. But we're not going to use the if, we're going to use the switch. So a switch starts with the word switch, okay? And you use a switch when you're basing a decision on the contents of a variable. Okay, so I'm basing my decision on the contents of the variable choice. So I'm going to say switch choice, okay? And I'm going to put some curly braces there before I forget. And now, what you put inside the switch, you need to list all the options and what you're going to do in each case. So in the case that choice is a 1, I have something I'm going to do. Okay. In the case, in the case that the user entered 2, I'm going to put what I want to do, and in the case that the user enters a 3, I'm going to put what I want to do. So I've listed the 3 cases here, and I'm going to fill in some code in between. In other words, I'm going to fill in the code that I'm going to execute if choice is 1, or if choice is 2, or if choice is 3. It's also possible that choice isn't any of these things at all, in which case I'm going to provide something called the default, which is what I want to do if 1, 2, or 3 is not entered. Right? And this is kind of the setup for my switch, right? You start with a switch. You indicate the variable that you want to that your decision is based on. And it actually doesn't have to be a variable. It could be an expression. Like if I wanted the user to, if for some reason I wanted to base my decision on choice plus 1, I could put like a plus 1 in there or something. As long as whatever is in here evaluates to an int, I can use a switch. Okay, so in the case, and there are 3 cases. So in the case that that choice was 1, I wanted to print out the first name only, so I know how to do that. Okay. In the case that the user entered a 2, I want to just print out the last name. And in the case that the user entered a 3, I want to print out the last name followed by a comma followed by the first name. And in the situation where the choice was not 1, 2, or 3, what I want to do is print out that an invalid choice was made. Okay. So I'm kind of just giving a little error message so it'll be clear that my program isn't printing out a name because the user didn't enter 1, 2, or 3. Now, this is right. There's actually a little bit more I have to add to this, but I want to run it right now. I want us to run it right now just so we can really observe the way a switch works. Okay, and make sure that what we have so far is working. So everybody should run theirs and make sure it make sure it works, and enter. It doesn't matter what you enter for your first and last name. But I would suggest when it's asked what you want to output, when the menu's presented, I would ask that you type in a 1. In other words, you want the first name only, and see if you only get the first name. So you tell me what happens when you enter a 1. Is everybody still getting compile errors, or just getting to this point, or? Tell me what happens when you enter a 1 if you typed in what I have on the screen. Well, I'll type in a 1 and hit enter. Oh, interesting. I typed in a 1 that I wanted just to see the first name, but it actually printed out the first name, the last name, and the full name. Okay, and invalid choice. It actually did. When I just typed in the 1, it actually executed each one of these cout statements. Okay, and that's not what we wanted to happen. And the reason that happens is because with a case, you actually, the way a case works is it'll match the way a switch works is it'll match the variable with whatever the situation is. So here it matched choice with 1, and then it executes all the statements in the rest in the remainder of the switch. So since my choice was 1, it did all these 4 statements. If my choice had been 2, it would have just done the last name, and then it would have gone on to the full name and the invalid choice. And if it was 3, it would have just executed these last 2 couts. Now that seems sort of like it's not going to be very useful, but there are sometimes when you want to actually execute 1 or 2 options when you're doing a match. So this feature of the switch and the way it works in this way allows you to do more than one thing, and allows you to basically match more than one case, if you will, if you lay out your cases correctly. In our situation, we don't want to make use of the feature of executing more than one of our cout statements, so we would put a break after each one of these. When you put a break, what that does, it just means after you've executed this statement, leave the switch. And so for us, it will have the effect of if a 1 is matched, it'll execute the first name is, and then the switch will be over. If choice is a 2, it'll match case 2, and then the switch will be over. If choice is 3, it'll just do the cout in the third case, and that's the operation that we want, okay? So a common error when you're writing a switch is to forget to put the breaks in, okay? To forget to put the breaks in. It's, sometimes people think, gee, how annoying, why did they set it up that way that you would have to put the breaks in? And again, the idea is to give you flexibility. Like if you were in a situation where if choice was 2, you wanted to actually do the whatever you have under case 2 and case 3, you could set up your program that way. That's why the statement's designed that way. And you more likely don't use that type of a feature with the switch. So you just have to remember to put a break in after the code that ends each case. Okay, so does everybody have theirs working? Yeah? Okay, let's see if mine works now with my breaks. Okay, so I tried a 2 and I just got the last name, and that's what we wanted to get. Okay, so is everybody's worked? Are there any questions about the switch and how the switch is set up and how the switch works and what we have in our, or anything that we have in our program so far? So very simple program. Okay, very simple program. All we're doing is reading in a first and a last name, and then providing a menu, and then handling the user's the user's choice, right, by using a switch. Okay, now I want to change this around a little bit. If there are any questions, I'm going to change just one thing, which will affect the way we perform our actions on the string. Rather than prompting the user to enter their first name and their last name, I'm just going to tell the user, hey, enter your full name, and I'm going to change my variable to name. So I'm just going to read in a name. Okay, so in other words, instead of using two CNs and having separate first and last names, I'm going to say enter your full name. Of course, if somebody has a full name, their full name is their first and last name, and it's probably got a space in the middle, so I'm going to have to use what to get the full name? Get line. No choice. Name. Okay. And so now I only need one variable, and then my one variable is holding the entire name, whether it be with the space included. Okay, so now things are a little bit different because I'm not going to be able to. Let's see what happens. I had those variables first and last before, and that's what I was printing out. And you notice now I have little red squiggly marks under first and last because I don't have those variables anymore because I didn't read anything into those variables. I might actually still have the variable last. I don't know. No, I deleted it. Okay. So anyway, I can't do it this way. Okay. I have to do something with the variable name. My menu is still okay. I've got the name. My menu is still okay. Reading in the user's choice is still okay. And the switch is, the basic structure of the switch is still fine, but I'm going to have to do different stuff in each of these cases, right? I'm going to have to do something different in each one of these situations because I don't have those variables. Okay? I'm going to have to work with the string name. And so that's what we're going to continue on with. Now I want to go over to the board for a second and just talk a little bit about strings. So let's see, where were we? So we have our name, and let's just think about the first name only. Right here, we want to put a statement that will print out the first name only, and we have a great big, the whole name in one variable, right? In one big string, and we want to get the first name out of it. Well, okay, our string probably has, the first name. The user probably entered whatever their first name is, followed by a blank, followed by the last name, right? That's what we're kind of assuming here. So if I just wanted to print the first name, any ideas of the approach that I might use? How could I get a piece of a string out from another string? Substring, yeah. If I could grab a substring with just the first name, and then I'd have the first name. Now, how can I figure out where that first name is? What do I know about the first name? What follows the first name? Yeah, the first name is going to be followed by a blank. So if I knew the position of that blank, then I'd know I could figure out the substring that I want to get, right? Because I'm assuming that the user might have entered something like this. This is index 0, and whatever that index is, I don't know what it is, but if I knew what the index of that, then I know I could get the substring starting at 0, and I could figure out the length of the first name by the position of that blank. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is find the position of the blank. I like to declare my variables up at the top, but I'm going to put it right here just because I don't want to be all over the screen. So I'm just going to declare this variable called position or pause, and I'm going to have that be name.find blank. Okay. And again, what I would expect if the user gave me good input with that one blank there, then that pause will now contain the index of where the blank is. Okay, so let's test that out a little bit. I'm gonna put a statement in here. Whoops, put a statement in here that I'll delete later, but just so we can follow what's going on. I'm gonna print out the position of the blank here. Okay, so let's see. So we go, whoops, let's see, what doesn't it like? Oh, I see, it doesn't like these empty breaks. Okay, I'm just gonna put something in here so that I don't have empty breaks so I can run this. Okay, and now let's look and see. Oh, it doesn't like that either. It doesn't like. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now I'm remembering why. You know, we don't really want to declare that in there. I'm just going to put my declaration up at the top. It actually, you typically don't, and I was just doing it for convenience, you typically don't declare something inside of a switch because it's considered to be, I think, local, or just exist for the execution of that switch. So strange things can happen. So it didn't like that I declared that there. So I just want, basically I want to run this, pick a 1, and see if it's going to find my blank correctly before we go on to do anything else. So, okay, so if I'm going to enter a full name, okay, so I'm entering a full name, and I expect this to tell me that the blank is where? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at index 7. When I say first name only, I expect to see the position of blank is at index 7, okay? So that tells me good what I have here is working. I know, so now I know the position of my blank. So my first name, I'll probably have to go back up and declare these variables. My first name, actually I don't really have to put it in a variable. And what I want to print out is name.substring. And again, the substring I want starts at index 0. And I know that the blank that follows is at position 7. So how many characters long is the first name? 7, yeah. Because it started at 0. Sometimes you have to work this out on a piece of paper. Right? If you write down a name and you put indexes under it, you'll see it a little bit more easily. But yeah, it started. If the first blank is at position 7, then the last character of the first name is at position 6. So indices 0 through 6 are the names. So it is 7. The length is 7. Okay, so I can just print this out. Okay, so we've printed out the first name. And just a quick check to make sure that works. Let's see. Okay, and so the 1 worked. Okay, so that's 1/3 of our job. Okay, so now case 2, and I said I was going to comment, so I should. It's nice to, in control structures like this, to indicate what's going on. Okay, so here, after I write the code that's going to do the last name only. Now, I know, well, I could probably do it in a similar manner, right? I know the last name goes through, the last name is going to start right after the blank. So again, if I knew where the blank was, If I knew where the blank was, I'm going to do the same thing here. If I knew where the blank was, then I know that the substring that I want to print starts at, well, what index does it start at? If pause is the position of the blank, where does the last name start? The next position, right? So that would be pause plus 1. And how long, now this is interesting, so now how long is the name? The second part right here, I'm just going to say, let's see, what do we say, name dot size minus pause. And you don't need the size and the length. I guess you don't need the parentheses. I was getting my languages mixed up here. So I was getting an error with the parentheses. So you don't need the parentheses. It's just a variable that contains that value, I guess. I don't know. I thought you did. Let me see. Now I'm confusing myself between languages. I think you need the parentheses. Let's see. Let's see if it works. So this is what we want to print out. Let's see. So we're going to try to get a last name out of this. Yeah, I guess you do need the parentheses because we would have a problem. It would tell us if I had it and I didn't need it. Okay, so I just want the last name. And it's printing out a 2. Did I? Oh, tell me what I did. Tell me what I did here. It's printing out a 2. Why is it printing out a 2? Let's see. It printed out the number 2, yeah. Which is kind of interesting. Let's see. I'm going to run that again. Whoops. Run that again just to double check. But that's, oh, come on, don't do that. Okay, let's see. Let's just double check. Sure looked like it was doing that. Let's see. Enter your full name. John Doe. Okay. 2, so I want the last name only. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. It said the last name is, and there's the last name, and there's just my formatting is bad. It did work. I didn't see the text because I didn't put the end L in there. Okay, so that worked. Okay, does anybody have any questions about, again, what we're doing here? The same thing as we did up here. We just had to figure out the index, the length, and we used to have to do a little addition to find the start position. Is everybody's working? Yes? I don't hear you. You don't think so? Part 2. Now, and you can probably guess how we're going to do the third part, right? We know how to get the first name. We know how to get the last name. And if we had the first and last name, we can just print them out in opposite order with a comma in between, right? So let's see. I don't have those variables first and last, but actually I think they're going to be handy here because I kind of need to. Well, I don't really need to do it. I'm going to do it with variables, so I don't really have to use variables. I'm just doing it to make it clear because just because we can actually print the whole thing out by putting a couple substrings in our output statement, but I want it to be clear to everybody what we're doing, so I'm just going to do it this way. And again, where I put the variables, I could just be putting the substring expression, but I'm just want to make it really clear what I'm doing. So I know how to get the first name. I know how to get the last name. I'm just cutting and pasting it down there. I know it works already because I've already done that. So then I can just print out last and concatenate that with a comma, and concatenate that with first. Okay, and that should print out the last name, comma, first. And again, where I put last, I could have put this whole great big thing, or I put first, I could have put this whole great big thing. I just didn't want the statement to look really obscure, so I didn't do that. I wanted it to be clear for you to read. Okay, so you should be, so parts 1, 2, and 3, parts 1, 2, and 3 should work just fine. So test it out. Then we're just going to add one more little thing. Mine is not working. Oh, I used pause, and I didn't calculate my pause first over here in this switch. Yeah, I have to calculate pause over. Now that I'm seeing that I have actually, and you might be seeing this too, since cases 1, 2, and 3 start by finding the blank, it might not be a bad idea to find the blank before the switch even starts. And then I wouldn't have to repeat that line of code. I'll move that in a minute, but if you're doing something in all your cases, you might as well just do it before you enter the switch, right? Just do it one time, because you're always going to have to do it. So is everybody's case 3 working okay? So I just found, yeah, so we'll just find the position of the blank first, then I remove them from all 3 of those, just to keep the switch simpler. And now something becomes kind of obvious. If I put this up here, then before I start the switch, I know where the blank is. But what if the user didn't enter a blank? I mean, our whole plan, everything we're doing, counts on the user having entered a blank, and probably they would have. But what if they didn't, right? So I probably, just to safeguard myself on something here, I'm going to just say if. I'm going to put a little if here. I'm going to say if name dot find blank. Okay, and I could use a single character or a string with a blank, either way, just a blank. If that is equal to, and this is that value we talked about before, the value that's returned if nothing's found, that npos value. So if name.find doesn't give me an index, but gives me that string npos, okay, then I'm going to print out a name was not input in proper format. Okay. Else, I'm just going to put one statement here. Else, I'm going to execute the rest of my program. I'm probably going to indent it a little bit so it goes into the fits into the so I can read it better, but my keyboard is really going here. Okay, but so this else, I said, if the blank was not found, I'm printing, hey, I'm not going to do anything. Otherwise, I'm going to do everything that we did. So in other words, the rest of the program, the entire switch, and everything up until the through the switch, I'm going to indent it nicely, but I'm going to place in the else. So this is the end of my else. Just Let me see if I can get most of this to show on the screen by removing some blank lines here. As a matter of fact, I did this after the menu. It might not even been a bad idea to do it before the menu. I could actually move the menu down. That actually is a nicer idea, but I don't want to confuse you at this point. But I might even just grab this whole chunk and put it right in here in my else. So after I've read the name, if there wasn't a blank, I'm saying, yeah, I am going to do that actually. Because it's just so much nicer. So I am going to, right after I ask for the name, I'm looking to see if there's a blank. If there's not a name, I'm going to say, hey, that's not in proper format. And that's the last thing it's going to execute in this program. Otherwise, I'm going to do everything else that we went on to do. Find the position of the blank, give them the menu, read the input, and go on to my switch. And all that stuff is in the else. Okay, that way when you run your program, if you give a name without a blank in the middle, it will just give an error message and not even try to do any processing and not even present a menu, not even do anything. Okay. And so that's pretty much all we need to do until we get. I think we're all ready to start the lab. I just have to unlock it and get started on it. We just have one lab today, 3.30, and